"You're safe," the lonely rancher said when he saw an Apache woman crying in the rain. The sky was heavy and gray that afternoon, the kind of gray that seemed to press down on everything beneath it. The wind whispered across the dry desert plains, carrying with it the sharp smell of rain yet to fall. Samuel, a man who had spent most of his life tending the lonely ranch at the edge of the wilderness, looked up at the clouds with a familiar sigh. He was used to storms, both in the sky and in life, but today something about the wind felt different. It carried a strange chill, a sense that the world was about to change, even if just for a moment. Samuel was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of hard work, with calloused hands that told stories of mending fences, feeding cattle, and clearing fields. His hair, once a deep brown, was now flecked with gray, and his face bore lines that spoke of laughter, sorrow, and solitude. He had lived on this ranch for as long as he could remember, ever since his parents had passed and left him to care for the land alone. The ranch was vast and quiet, a place where the only sounds were the wind, the cattle, and the occasional rustle of wildlife. Though beautiful in its own way, it was also a place of isolation. Samuel had grown accustomed to being alone, and yet sometimes, in moments like this, the loneliness settled heavily in his chest. He had just finished feeding the animals when a movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it might be a shadow cast by the rolling clouds, but then he saw it again, an unmistakable figure in the distance. The rain had not yet started, but the figure moved quickly across the uneven terrain, hunched as if trying to protect itself from something. Samuel squinted, trying to make out the shape. As the figure drew closer, he could see that it was a woman. She was alone, drenched, and seemed to be crying, though the distance made it hard to tell. A tight knot formed in Samuel's stomach. It had been years since he had seen another person at this ranch, and even then, strangers were often trouble. Stories of bandits, wandering outlaws, and dangerous encounters had been part of his life for as long as he could remember. And yet, there was something different about this woman. Something in the way she moved, vulnerable and unguarded, pulled at a part of him he had almost forgotten existed, the part that felt compassion and concern. The first few drops of rain began to fall, soft at first, then stronger, turning into a steady sheet that blurred the horizon. The woman stumbled, catching herself on a low bush, and Samuel noticed the tears on her face, mixing with the rain and streaking down her cheeks. Her hair, dark and wet, clung to her face, and her clothes were soaked through. She seemed small against the vast expanse of the desert, fragile and out of place, as if she did not belong to this harsh land at all. Samuel set down the bucket he had been carrying and wiped his hands on his worn trousers. He felt a pull he couldn't ignore. Something about her reminded him of all the people he had lost over the years, all the friends and family who had either moved on or passed away, leaving him with only memories and silence. Without thinking, he started walking toward her, his boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. "Hey," he called, his voice steady but gentle. "You're safe. Come on over here." The woman froze for a moment, as if unsure whether to trust the voice. Samuel could see her glance over her shoulder, and he realized she might have been running from something, or someone. The thought made his heart tighten. In all his years, he had learned that fear could be as dangerous as the elements themselves. He moved slowly, giving her space, hands slightly raised in a gesture of peace. "I won't hurt you," he said. "You're safe here. Come on." The woman's lips trembled as she took a cautious step toward him. Samuel noticed the small details, the slight shake of her hands, the way she kept her eyes on the ground as if the earth itself might betray her. He felt a wave of protectiveness wash over him, stronger than anything he had felt in years. When she was close enough, he could finally see her face clearly. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with sharp features softened by the tears streaming down her cheeks. Her eyes, dark and deep, reflected pain and fear, but also something else, hope. the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who would help her. Samuel took a careful step closer, holding out his hand, not to touch her but as a sign of welcome. "You don't have to be afraid." "There's a roof over there," he said, pointing toward the small ranch house behind him. "You can get out of the rain. I've got blankets and we can get some warm food in you. You'll be safe here tonight." The woman hesitated, glancing at the rain-soaked plains around them and then back at him. There was a moment of silence, broken only by the sound of rain pounding against the earth and the distant roll of thunder. Finally, with a small nod, she took another step forward. Samuel could see her shiver from the cold and exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible over the storm. Together they walked toward the house, the rain soaking them both, but neither speaking much. Samuel kept his gaze on her, noting every tremble, every sign of fear or fatigue. She seemed to gather courage with each step, though it was clear she had been running for a long time. When they reached the porch, he offered her his hand to help her up the wet steps. She accepted it reluctantly, gripping it tightly as if it were a lifeline. Inside the small, warm cabin, the contrast was immediate. The smell of burning wood from the fireplace filled the air, comforting and familiar. Samuel guided her to a chair near the fire and handed her a thick blanket. She wrapped it around herself, sighing in relief as warmth spread over her chilled body. Samuel could see the tension slowly leave her shoulders, but the fear in her eyes remained, lurking just beneath the surface. He went to the kitchen, filling a kettle with water and placing it over the fire. "We can get you some tea," he said, "and then you can tell me what happened if you want." The woman nodded silently, her gaze fixed on the flames dancing in the hearth. Samuel went to fetch some dried clothes he had kept in a chest for emergencies. Old shirts, trousers, and a coat that might be too big for her, but would at least keep her warm and dry. As he returned, he noticed how small and fragile she seemed, the weight of her journey visible in every movement. He handed her the clothes and stepped back, giving her space to change. She did so quietly, carefully, like someone trying not to disturb the fragile peace of the room. When she emerged, slightly awkward in the oversized garments, Samuel offered her a cup of tea. She took it with both hands, sipping slowly, her eyes never leaving the fire. For a while they sat in silence, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the rain tapping against the windows. Samuel wondered what story this woman carried, what pain had brought her here, and how much of it he could help ease. He did not rush her, knowing that trust took time, especially in a world that had taught her to fear strangers. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. I didn't know where else to go," she said. Samuel nodded, understanding without needing more words. "You're safe here," he repeated gently. "No one's going to hurt you, not tonight." The woman looked up at him, and for the first time, Samuel saw a glimmer of relief in her eyes. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to tell him that he had done the right thing. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small cabin there was warmth, light, and a fragile sense of safety. For Samuel, it was more than just a shelter from the rain. It was a reminder that even in the loneliest places, compassion could still reach across the distance, and two strangers could find a connection that neither expected. The storm outside showed no sign of slowing, rain pounding against the roof and windows, turning the landscape into a blur of gray and brown. Inside the small cabin, the fire crackled, filling the space with warmth and light. The woman, still wrapped in the thick blanket Samuel had given her, held the cup of tea in her hands as if it were a lifeline. She took slow, careful sips, trying to calm her trembling. Samuel watched her quietly, giving her time to regain some strength before asking questions. After a long pause, the woman spoke again, her voice low and cautious. I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't know where else to go." Samuel nodded. He understood the words without needing more explanation. Many people who had found themselves in dangerous or desperate situations often traveled alone, afraid to trust anyone. He knew that trust had to be earned, not demanded. "You're not intruding," he said gently. "If I didn't help, you'd be out in this storm, and that wouldn't do either of us any good. You can stay here until you're ready to move on, or until you feel safe again." The woman lowered her head, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks. Her eyes, dark and deep, held a sadness that Samuel had seen in few people before. It wasn't just fear, it was grief. Something had happened to her, something that had left a mark deeper than a storm or a long journey could create. He waited, allowing her to speak in her own time. Finally, after what felt like hours to Samuel, she lifted her gaze. "My name is Aeon," she said softly. I come from the Apache village near the river. There was trouble. Some men attacked and I had to run. I couldn't stay, not if I wanted to survive." Samuel felt a pang of sympathy. He knew the stories of conflicts between settlers and Apache people, but he also knew that not every story was simple, and not every person deserved judgment based on old fears. He nodded slowly, carefully. "I'm Samuel," he said. "I live here on this ranch. You're safe now, Aeon. No one is going to hurt you here." She hesitated, looking into his eyes, searching for any hint of doubt or deception. When she found none, she let out a shaky breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. I thought no one would help me." Samuel gestured toward a chair by the fire. "Sit down. I'll get you something to eat. You must be starving after walking in that storm." Aeon moved slowly, still weak from her journey, and sat near the fire. Samuel went to the small kitchen area, gathering a simple meal of bread, cheese, and some dried meat he had stored for emergencies. He set it down on a worn wooden table and motioned for her to eat. "Eat as much as you need," he said. "There's plenty." She picked at the food, taking small bites at first, then gradually eating more as she regained strength. Samuel watched her, noticing the careful way she handled each piece, as if she had learned long ago that every meal counted. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward, as if both had accepted that words were not always necessary to communicate. Once Aeon had eaten enough to regain some energy, Samuel took a seat across from her. "You must have walked a long way in the rain," he said gently. "It couldn't have been easy," Aeon nodded. "It was. I had no choice. I left everything behind, my village, my family, my home. I didn't know where to go, and then I saw the ranch. I hoped someone would be here, someone who wouldn't turn me away." Samuel leaned back in his chair, thinking about her words. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to see someone so desperate for help. Her story was not just about survival. It was about courage, about making a choice to keep living even when the world seemed determined to stop you. He felt a respect for her growing inside him, mingled with a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. "You're safe here, Aeon," he said again, his voice firm but kind. "You don't have to worry about anyone hurting you while you're with me. You can rest, eat, and get warm. That's all that matters right now." Aeon looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. For a moment she said nothing, just letting the warmth of the cabin seep into her soaked body. Then slowly she nodded. I don't know how to thank you," she said. I've never had someone do this for me before." Samuel smiled faintly, a little awkwardly. "You don't have to thank me. Everyone deserves a little kindness now and then. Besides," he added with a hint of humor, "you'd probably be shivering outside if I didn't help. That's punishment enough." Aeon allowed herself a small, shy smile. It was brief, but it was there, and it warmed Samuel's heart in a way he hadn't felt for a long time. The fire crackled between them, and for a few moments the sound of the storm outside seemed distant, unimportant. Inside there was safety, warmth, and the quiet understanding between two people who had both faced hardship in their own ways. After a while, Samuel decided it was time to learn more about her journey. He didn't press, though. He knew that trust had to come naturally. "If you feel ready," he said gently, "you can tell me what happened, only what you want to share. I won't push you to talk about anything you're not ready for." Aeon nodded, taking a deep breath. It's hard to talk about, she admitted, but I think I need to. I need to tell someone or I'll carry it alone, and I can't do that anymore. Samuel gave her an encouraging nod. Take your time. I'll listen. She spoke slowly at first, describing how her village had been attacked. She didn't go into every violent detail, but she spoke of the fear, the chaos, and the feeling of having no one to turn to. She told him about the long, lonely run through the wilderness, the hunger, the cold, and the endless rain that seemed determined to wash her away. Through it all, Samuel listened, offering occasional words of comfort and understanding. I didn't know if I would make it, she said finally, her voice trembling. I thought maybe this was the end. Samuel reached out, placing a hand on hers. It was a small gesture, but it carried a weight of reassurance. You made it, he said firmly, and you're safe now. You're not alone anymore. Aeon's eyes glistened with tears, not of fear this time, but of relief. She looked at Samuel with a mixture of gratitude and wonder, as if she had found something she thought she'd lost forever, hope. For the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, they talked quietly, not just about the storm or her journey, but about life itself. Samuel shared stories of the ranch, of the animals, and the small joys of a quiet life. Aeon told him about her village, the traditions she cherished, and the people she loved. It was a slow process of connection, a bridge being built between two very different worlds. As the night grew darker and the storm continued outside, Samuel felt a change within himself. The loneliness that had been a constant companion for so many years was beginning to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. He realized that helping Aeon was not just about offering shelter from a storm. It was about rebuilding trust, about finding connection and understanding in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. Aeon, too, felt something shift inside her. For the first time since she had fled her village, she allowed herself to relax, to breathe, to believe that maybe, just maybe, there were still people in the world who would see her as a human being, not just as a target or a stranger. By the time the storm finally began to ease, the two of them had formed a quiet bond. Words had been exchanged, stories had been shared, and the small cabin, once just a place of shelter, had become a space of safety and comfort. The fire burned low, casting a warm glow across their faces, and outside the rain began to fade into a gentle drizzle. Samuel looked at Aeon, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope for the future, not just for himself, but for her as well. In the middle of the storm, in the middle of hardship and fear, they had found something rare and precious: trust, understanding, and the quiet promise that no one had to face the world completely alone. The morning after the storm dawned with a soft light filtering through the thin clouds. The rain had stopped, leaving the earth damp and glistening under the sun's gentle rays. Samuel woke early, as he always did, the routine of ranch life etched into him after decades of work. He stretched, feeling the soreness in his muscles from years of labor, and glanced at Aeon. She was still asleep, wrapped in the thick blanket he had given her, her breathing steady and calm. For a moment, he simply watched her. The fear and exhaustion of the previous night seemed to have faded, replaced by a fragile peace. Samuel had never expected company on his ranch, certainly not someone like Aeon. Yet seeing her there, safe and resting, he felt a strange warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. He moved quietly, stepping outside to check the animals. The ranch was alive with morning sounds, the lowing of cattle, the rustling of dry grass, the distant call of a hawk. The storm had passed, but its traces remained. Puddles scattered across the yard, mud clinging to the hooves of the horses, and the fresh, clean smell of wet earth. Samuel worked efficiently, feeding the animals and checking the fences, his mind half on his routine, half on Aeon. He wondered how she was feeling after the long night, whether the warmth and shelter had given her a chance to start feeling human again after so much fear. When he returned inside, Aeon was awake, sitting by the fire with a small bowl of porridge. She smiled at him faintly as he entered, a gesture that carried both gratitude and caution. Samuel nodded in return, his own smile small but genuine. "Good morning," he said simply. "Did you sleep well?" Aeon nodded, stirring the porridge with a careful hand. "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted. I didn't know I could rest after everything that happened, but last night for the first time I felt safe." Samuel felt a pang of relief. That was all he wanted, to give her a moment of peace, a moment where the world outside couldn't reach her. "That's good," he said. "You deserve it. Everyone deserves a safe place, even if only for a little while." They ate quietly, the morning sun gradually warming the cabin. After breakfast, Samuel suggested that she explore the ranch a little, just to stretch her legs and see the land. "The rain left a lot of mud," he warned with a grin. "But it's worth seeing. The land can be beautiful if you know where to look." Aeon followed him outside, careful not to slip on the wet ground. The ranch was larger than she had imagined, with rolling fields, scattered trees, and the animals grazing calmly in the damp grass. She paused often, taking in the sights, the smells, and the sounds of a world so different from the one she had fled. Samuel watched her, noticing how she marveled at the simple things, the way the sunlight reflected off the wet leaves, the birds hopping from branch to branch, the gentle movement of the horses. "You like it?" Samuel asked, his voice gentle. Aeon nodded. "It's peaceful," she said softly. "I haven't seen peace in a long time. Not since before everything changed." Samuel understood without asking. Peace was something he had always sought, yet it had been fleeting. The ranch had given him routine and stability, but it hadn't erased loneliness. Seeing her find a small measure of calm reminded him that even in isolation, connection could be found. Over the next few days, their relationship grew slowly, naturally. Samuel taught Aeon how to help with the ranch chores, feeding the animals, mending fences, and checking the water supply. He showed her how to handle the horses gently, how to notice when an animal was sick or tired, and how to move with patience and care. Aeon, in turn, shared her knowledge of the land from a different perspective. She taught him how to identify edible plants, how to track small animals, and the ways the land could provide sustenance if one knew where to look. They learned from each other, not just skills, but ways of seeing the world. Samuel realized that Aeon's knowledge came from generations of her people living close to the land, learning its rhythms, respecting its limits, and understanding its dangers. Aeon saw that Samuel's strength was not just in his hands or his body, but in his patience, endurance, and the quiet wisdom of years spent observing and caring for life in its many forms. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories from their past. Samuel told her about his parents, about the early days on the ranch, and the mistakes and triumphs that had shaped his life. Aeon spoke of her family, her village, and the traditions that had once given her identity and comfort. She described the dances, the songs, and the quiet rituals that connected her to her ancestors, painting vivid pictures with her words. Samuel listened, fascinated and respectful, learning about a world so different from his own. Through these exchanges, they began to heal together. Samuel's loneliness, once so heavy, began to lift, replaced by a sense of companionship he hadn't realized he needed. Aeon's grief, though still present, softened as she found understanding and acceptance in someone who did not judge her for her past or her people. They found comfort in the simple acts of life, preparing food, tending animals, and sharing stories by the fire. One afternoon, after a long day of work, Aeon sat on the porch, watching the sun dip low behind the distant hills. Samuel joined her, handing her a cup of water. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, reflecting on the wet ground from the recent rains. For a moment, neither spoke, content to simply watch the world and feel its quiet beauty. "It's different from my home," Aeon said softly, "but it feels safe, like I can breathe again." Samuel nodded. "That's what a home should feel like," he said. "Not just walls and a roof, but a place where you can be yourself, where the world outside can't hurt you. I'm glad you found it here, even if it's only temporary." Aeon smiled faintly. "Temporary? I hope it's more than that. I want to learn to stay strong, to find a reason to keep going." Samuel placed a hand on hers, a quiet gesture of reassurance. "You already are strong," he said. "You survived the storm, the fear, the journey. That shows more courage than most people ever need to find. And you're not alone anymore. You have someone who will stand with you." The days passed in this quiet rhythm. Samuel and Aeon worked together, laughed quietly at small mistakes, and celebrated tiny victories. The repaired fence, a calf that had finally learned to drink from the trough, the first vegetables sprouting in the garden. They found joy in simple accomplishments, in the shared effort of tending the land and caring for life. But more importantly, they shared understanding. Samuel learned about the importance of family and community in Aeon's culture, and how deeply the land was tied to identity and memory. Aeon learned about patience, resilience, and the quiet dignity of a life lived with care and consistency. They were teaching each other without realizing it, bridging gaps that years of separation and hardship had created. One evening, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside, Aeon spoke of her fear of the future. "I don't know what will happen," she admitted. "I've lost so much already. How can I trust that life will give me anything good?" Samuel thought for a moment before answering. "Life isn't always fair, and sometimes it gives more challenges than anyone should bear. But it also gives moments like this, small, quiet moments where you feel safe, seen, and cared for. You can't predict everything, but you can choose to keep moving forward, one day at a time. And you don't have to do it alone." Aeon listened, the warmth of the fire reflecting in her eyes. She realized that in Samuel she had found not just shelter from a storm, but someone who believed in her, someone who would walk beside her as she rebuilt her life. The fear she had carried for so long began to loosen, replaced by a cautious hope. As the night deepened, they sat together in companionable silence, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the world was quiet, the remnants of the storm settling into the earth. Inside, two people, once alone in their own ways, had begun to heal, learning from each other, teaching each other, and slowly, quietly, finding a sense of belonging. In the shared effort of survival, the exchange of knowledge, and the simple acts of care, Samuel and Aeon discovered that even in the harshest of places, connection and healing were possible. They were no longer just a lonely rancher and a frightened traveler. They were companions, teachers, and friends. And in that quiet bond, both of them found strength they had thought lost forever. Days turned into a week, and the quiet rhythm of the ranch continued. Samuel and Aeon had grown comfortable in each other's company, sharing the chores, meals, and small joys of ranch life. The bond between them had strengthened through shared work and quiet conversation, and Samuel found that his once lonely cabin now felt alive with purpose. Aeon's presence brought a warmth that the walls themselves seemed to reflect. But peace rarely lasted long in a land where history ran deep and old fears lingered. Word of an Apache woman being seen at the ranch had begun to spread to the neighboring settlements. Rumors traveled fast across the plains, carried by travelers, traders, and those with little understanding of the truth. Some of the settlers were curious, others suspicious, and a few were openly hostile. Samuel noticed the wary glances from a distance, the lingering questions from those who passed by. One morning, while Samuel was checking the cattle near the edge of the property, he noticed a small group approaching. They were armed, their faces serious, and their eyes fixed on the ranch. He felt a tension coil in his chest, a familiar alertness that told him something serious was about to happen. It wasn't just curiosity this time, It was concern, suspicion, and perhaps fear. He returned to the cabin quickly, his mind racing. Aeon was outside, tending to a small patch of garden near the porch. Samuel called her in gently but with urgency. "Aeon, come inside," he said. She looked up, sensing the change in his tone, and followed him immediately, leaving her tools on the ground. Inside, Samuel locked the doors and checked the windows. "They're coming," he said quietly. "A group of men probably looking for you." Aeon's face went pale. Fear, the kind that had driven her across the plains, returned in a wave. She clutched the edge of the table, her hands trembling slightly. I thought I was safe here," she whispered. "You are safe," Samuel said firmly, "but we need to be smart. I won't let anyone hurt you while you're under my roof. I promise that." The sound of horses' hooves grew louder, and soon they could see the figures through the rain-streaked windows. There were 4 men, moving cautiously, their expressions unreadable. Samuel knew that confrontation was inevitable, but he also knew that he had the advantage of the home ground and the knowledge of his land. He took a deep breath and turned to Aeon. "Stay behind me," he said. "No matter what happens, I'll handle this. You just stay safe." The men approached the cabin and called out, "Samuel, we hear there's an Apache woman here. We need to check." Their voices were firm, carrying authority but also suspicion. Samuel stepped to the door and opened it just enough to speak. "There is a woman here," he said calmly. "But she's not causing trouble. She's safe in my care." One of the men stepped forward, a burly figure with a scowl. "We don't know who she is or why she's here. You can't just hide people." Samuel held his ground. "She's under my protection. You can't harm her while she's on my property. I won't allow it." The tension was thick, like the heavy clouds before a storm. The men exchanged glances, weighing their options. One of them, younger than the rest, hesitated. We need to follow the law," he said quietly. Samuel's voice was steady, though his heart raced. "The law doesn't mean hurting someone who's innocent. She's been through enough already. I won't let anyone add to that." For a long moment, silence hung between them. The men looked at each other, then back at Samuel. Finally, they seemed to decide that confrontation wasn't worth it. With grumbled warnings and uneasy looks, they turned their horses and rode off, leaving the ranch quiet once more. Aeon let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through her. I was so afraid," she admitted. "I thought they'd take me away." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You're safe," he said again. "No one's taking you while you're here. You don't have to be afraid of that anymore." The encounter left a lingering tension, though. Samuel knew that the world outside was not always kind, and that suspicion could return at any moment. But it also strengthened his resolve. He would protect Aeon, no matter what, because he had seen the courage and strength within her, and he knew she deserved safety and trust. Over the next few days, life continued on the ranch, but both Samuel and Aeon were more aware of the possibility of outsiders. Samuel took precautions, checking the fences more often, keeping an eye on the horizon, and teaching Aeon small ways to stay aware of her surroundings without letting fear control her. Aeon, in turn, learned to balance vigilance with trust, understanding that while danger existed, it didn't have to dominate her every moment. Their bond deepened as they faced this new challenge together. Samuel admired Aeon's courage, her willingness to trust again despite the pain she had endured. Aeon respected Samuel's calm strength, his ability to act decisively while still holding compassion in his heart. They learned from each other, each encounter outside reinforcing the value of trust, understanding, and careful vigilance. One evening, after ensuring the animals were safe and the doors securely locked, Samuel and Aeon sat by the fire. The wind had picked up again, rustling through the trees, and the sound reminded them of the approaching winter. Aeon spoke quietly, her voice thoughtful. "Do you ever worry that they'll come back?" Samuel nodded. "I do, but we can't let fear rule us. We prepare, we stay alert, but we don't let it take away our lives. You've survived so much already. Together we can face what comes next." Aeon nodded, drawing a deep breath. "I want to believe that. I want to feel hope again, even with the fear." "That's the spirit," Samuel said, smiling faintly. "Hope is stronger than fear if you let it be, and we're not alone anymore. That makes all the difference." The following days passed with cautious normalcy. They worked together, repaired broken fences, tended the garden, and cared for the animals. Each task, no matter how small, became a symbol of resilience, a way to reclaim control over their lives despite the threats lurking beyond the ranch. One afternoon, a messenger from a nearby settlement arrived with news. The patrol that had previously approached had reported back that there had been no trouble at Samuel's ranch, and that the woman was indeed unharmed. They had reluctantly accepted Samuel's words and had moved on. The news brought relief, but it also reminded them that vigilance would always be necessary. Samuel and Aeon reflected on the events quietly, understanding that the world outside could be unpredictable. Yet the ordeal had also brought them closer. They were no longer simply protector and protected. They were partners in survival, learning to navigate danger together, trusting each other in ways they had not thought possible. Aeon began to regain confidence in herself. She no longer flinched at every sound outside, no longer feared every shadow. She understood that she had a safe place, someone who cared, and that she could rely on her own strength as well as Samuel's guidance. Samuel, in turn, felt a renewed sense of purpose. Protecting Aeon wasn't just about keeping her safe. It was about building trust, forming a bond, and showing that kindness and courage could endure even in a harsh world. As winter approached, the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm again. They worked diligently to prepare for the cold, gathering firewood, repairing shelters for the animals, and ensuring that their home would be safe and comfortable. Each task strengthened their connection, and each shared moment became a testament to their growing trust and mutual respect. One night, as the stars began to shine brightly in the clear, cold sky, Samuel and Aeon stood outside for a moment, watching the quiet beauty of the land. The air was crisp, the world peaceful, and for a brief instant they allowed themselves to forget the dangers beyond the ranch. "You've taught me so much," Aeon said softly, breaking the silence. "Not just about the land, but about courage, trust, about life." "And you've taught me as well," Samuel replied. "About strength, resilience, and hope. You've reminded me that even in loneliness, connection is possible, that we can heal together." They stood quietly, side by side, feeling the wind on their faces and the quiet power of the world around them. The storm had passed, and though challenges remained, they were no longer facing them alone. Together, they had found safety, trust, and a bond that could endure whatever the outside world might bring. Winter had fully settled over the ranch, bringing with it a quiet stillness. The once green fields were now blanketed in frost, and the mornings were sharp with cold, making the breath of both humans and animals visible in the pale light. Samuel had grown used to the early chill, rising before dawn to feed the animals and check the fences, but this winter felt different. The presence of Aeon beside him brought warmth that no fire could match. The ranch, which had once been a place of solitary work and quiet reflection, was now filled with companionship and shared purpose. Aeon had adapted to the rhythm of the ranch life. She moved with confidence, helping Samuel tend the animals, gather firewood, and prepare meals. She had learned to ride the horses and care for the cattle, but beyond that, she had grown in spirit. The fear that had haunted her when she first arrived had been replaced by determination, and the gratitude she felt towards Samuel had blossomed into deep trust. Every day, she reminded herself of how far she had come, surviving not just the storms of nature but the storms of life. One frosty morning, Samuel and Aeon stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the sunrise paint the sky with streaks of gold and pink. The animals stirred slowly, their breath mingling with the cold air, and the world seemed calm, almost serene. Samuel's eyes scanned the horizon as he often did, a habit born of years spent in solitude and vigilance. He had learned to anticipate challenges, to notice even the smallest changes in the land, the weather, or the behavior of the animals. Aeon, standing beside him, was wrapped in a thick coat, her dark hair catching the light of the rising sun. She had grown stronger since her arrival, both physically and emotionally. The experiences she had endured, the flight from her village, the fear of being pursued, and the uncertainty of life, had left marks on her spirit, but they had also shaped her into someone resilient, capable, and thoughtful. She looked at Samuel, who seemed lost in thought, and asked softly, "Do you ever think about how life brought us together?" Samuel turned to her, a faint smile forming on his face. "I do," he admitted. "I never expected anyone to come here, especially not under such circumstances. But now I can't imagine this place without you." Aeon's eyes softened, reflecting a mixture of warmth and vulnerability. "I was so afraid when I first arrived," she said. "I didn't know if I could trust anyone again, but you gave me a chance. You showed me that not everyone is cruel or suspicious. You showed me kindness, even when I didn't know if I deserved it." Samuel's heart tightened at her words. He had spent so long alone that he sometimes wondered if he had forgotten how to connect with another human being, how to care without expectation. Aeon's presence reminded him that compassion was not a weakness but a strength. "We all deserve a chance," he said. "Sometimes it just takes finding the right person to give it to us." As the weeks passed, the bond between them deepened further. They worked together seamlessly, their movements coordinated and efficient, yet filled with mutual respect and care. Aeon taught Samuel subtle ways to observe the land from a different perspective, noticing signs of approaching weather, animal behavior, and the hidden rhythms of nature that she had learned from her ancestors. Samuel, in turn, guided her in the practical skills of ranch life, from mending fences to managing the cattle, offering encouragement and support whenever she faltered. Evenings were spent by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet reflection. They spoke of the past, not to dwell on pain, but to understand how it had shaped them. Samuel recounted memories of his parents, the early days of the ranch, and the lessons he had learned from hardship. Aeon shared the songs, dances, and traditions of her people, painting vivid images of a world that was both different and beautiful. Through these conversations, they discovered that despite the differences in their backgrounds, they shared common values: resilience, compassion, and the desire for safety and connection. One particularly cold evening, as snowflakes drifted past the window, Aeon spoke of her family, her voice tinged with sadness. "I sometimes wonder if I'll ever see my village again," she admitted. "If I'll ever see the faces I knew as a child." Samuel reached out and placed a comforting hand on hers. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly. "But I do know this: whatever happens, you are not alone. You have a home here, and you have someone who will stand by you. You are stronger than you realize, Aeon. And we will face whatever comes together." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of gratitude rather than fear. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For giving me a chance to feel safe again, for trusting me, and for believing in me when I couldn't even believe in myself." Samuel smiled, a quiet pride and affection in his expression. "It's not about believing in yourself alone," he said. "It's about having people who will walk with you, through storms and sunshine alike." The winter months continued with their routine, filled with work, learning, and quiet companionship. Yet there was also room for small celebrations, sharing a warm meal after a long day, noticing the first buds of life even in the frozen garden, or simply sitting together by the fire and watching the snow fall outside. Each moment, though simple, became a symbol of resilience, hope, and the strength of human connection. One morning, Aeon stood at the edge of the ranch, watching a herd of deer move gracefully across the frost-covered field. Samuel joined her, noticing the serene expression on her face. "You've come a long way," he said. "I can see it in the way you move, the way you look at the world. You've grown stronger, wiser, and braver." Aeon turned to him, a gentle smile on her lips. "I couldn't have done it alone," she said. "You've taught me so much, not just about the land or survival, but about trust, hope, and courage. I feel whole again in a way I didn't think was possible." Samuel felt a warmth in his chest, a satisfaction deeper than any material accomplishment. "We've both learned from each other," he said, "and that's what matters. Life isn't just about surviving, it's about growing, sharing, and finding meaning, even in the smallest moments." As winter began to fade into early spring, the ranch itself seemed to awaken. The frost melted, the first green shoots appeared in the garden, and the animals grew livelier with the changing weather. Samuel and Aeon worked together to prepare for the new season, planting seeds, repairing structures, and ensuring that the ranch would thrive. Each task was a testament to their partnership and shared determination. One evening, after a long day's work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted with shades of gold and pink, reflecting on the wet earth from the recent spring rains. Samuel reached over and took Aeon's hand gently, a gesture of comfort, trust, and shared experience. "You've brought life back into this place," he said softly, "and you've brought life back into me. I didn't realize how lonely I had been until you arrived." Aeon's eyes softened, reflecting the colors of the sunset. "And you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever," she said. "Safety, trust, and the knowledge that there are people who care, who will stand by me even when the world is uncertain." They sat together in companionable silence, feeling the gentle breeze on their faces and the quiet beauty of the world around them. The storm, the fear, and the challenges of the past months had shaped them, but they had endured, grown, and healed together. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a sanctuary, a space of safety, trust, and shared purpose. As night fell, the stars appeared one by one, shining brightly in the clear sky. Samuel and Aeon looked up, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. They knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but they also knew that together they could face whatever came. In the quiet of the ranch, surrounded by the land they had nurtured and protected, they found peace. Not just the absence of danger, but a sense of belonging, of connection, and of hope. Samuel had found companionship after years of solitude, and Aeon had found safety, trust, and a renewed sense of life. The story of the lonely rancher and the Apache woman, who had once been afraid and alone in the rain, had reached a point of quiet triumph. Together they had faced fear, uncertainty, and the challenges of the world outside. Together they had healed, learned, and grown. And together they had discovered the simple yet profound truth that even in the harshest of places, kindness, courage, and trust could create a home, a sanctuary, and a life worth living. As they finally turned inside for the night, the warmth of the fire welcoming them, both Samuel and Aeon felt a sense of completeness. Outside, the land was quiet, the animals settled, and the wind whispered gently through the trees. Inside, there was light, warmth, and the knowledge that they would face the future together, no longer alone and no longer afraid. And in that moment, they knew that they had truly found what so many seek but so few find, a home in the world and a home in each other's hearts.